You know, usually when a machine breaks down, say your car starts making this just terrifying loud metallic clanking noise on the highway, you just pull over. You pop the hood. It's an entirely physical thing, right? You look in there and you see belts, gears, fluids.
Right, yeah. A mechanic can literally just walk up, shine a flashlight, point a finger at a snap belt, and say, that right there is the problem.
Exactly. It's binary. A broken belt is a broken belt. You swap it out, the engine turns over, and the machine runs again.
And the relief is immediate, because the problem was visible. We completely understand physical mechanics.
We do.
Yeah.
But then you look at your life. You look at your career, your relationships, or just your underlying sense of daily anxiety. And when that stalls out, when your life starts making a terrifying clanking noise, there's no hood to pop.
Yeah, that's the hard part. The machinery driving human existence, the thing making you miserable or successful, it's completely invisible.
Which drives us absolutely crazy. I mean, as human beings, we desperately want a physical wrench. We want a tangible tool to fix the internal problem. But we are forced to operate in this invisible landscape of human thought.
We really are. You can't just point a flashlight at a bad attitude or subconscious fear.
Right. So that is exactly what we are doing in this deep dive today. We are looking under the hood of the human mind. And we have two sources on the table today that, honestly, at first glance, have absolutely no business being in the same room.
They really don't. It's a funny pairing.
It is. So first, we have Jeff Keller's book, Attitude is Everything. It's a massive staple of modern, late 20th century American self-help. Highly practical, very much geared toward motivation, business success, and personal accountability.
Yeah, it's basically the manual for the modern professional trying to climb the ladder and unlock their potential. Very practical.
Very. And then sitting directly across the table from that, we have the teachings of Swami Vivekananda. Specifically, we're drawing from his complete works and his writings on personality development.
Right. So we were talking about a 19th century Indian monk, a philosopher who took these ancient, highly complex spiritual mechanics of Vedanta and translated them for the Western world.
Exactly. So you have a modern American businessman focused on real estate and sales, and a 19th century monk focused on ultimate spiritual liberation.
They're separated by, a century of time, vastly different cultures, completely different languages, and seemingly opposite ultimate objectives.
Seemingly opposite. But our mission today is to do a comparative study. Because when you strip away the dense vocabulary, when you translate their massive ideas about how your mind works into very simple words, they arrive at the exact same uncompromising truth.
And that truth is that your thoughts completely control your destiny. Not kind of, not maybe, completely.
Completely. So to even begin changing those thoughts, we have to define the tool we are working with. We have to understand what the mind actually is in this context. And Jeff Keller approaches this with a highly visual, very immediate metaphor.
Right. He calls your mind, or your baseline attitude, your window to the world.
The window to the world. Keller asks us to imagine that every single human being starts out in life with a perfectly clean, flawless, squeaky clean mental window.
Like a toddler.
Yes, exactly like a toddler. You look at a kid and they are naturally curious. They have a sunny disposition. When a kid is learning to walk, they stumble, they fall down, they hit the carpet hard.
But they don't sit there, look at the floor, and construct some massive narrative about their own failure.
Right. They don't say, well, my parents are terrible walking instructors. I lack the genetic predisposition for walking. I am a fundamental failure.
They don't blame the carpet. The child's window is entirely unsmudged. They view the world without the filter of limitation, which means the world looks like a place of endless possibility.
A fall is just a fall. It isn't an indictment of their character, but, as we grow up, life happens, the window gets dirty, you fail a math test in the 4th grade. Smudge?
Yeah. A boss criticizes your work in front of your peers. Smudge.
You go through a terrible breakup. Smudge. Every rejection, every fear, every moment of self-doubt acts like literal dirt accumulating on that glass.
And Keller's point is that if you don't actively, consciously watch that window, you end up a 30 or 40-year-old adult looking at a beautiful, vibrant world through a filthy, pessimistic piece of glass.
And the real tragedy is, because the glass is dirty, you become convinced that the world is dirty. You perceive the world as a hostile, cynical, unforgiving place. You completely forget that you are just looking through your own unwashed filter.
Exactly. So Keller views the mind as this lens looking out at the external reality.
Looking out. But then you bring Swami Vivekananda into the room, and he takes his concept of the mind and turns it completely inside out.
He really does. He argues the mind isn't just a window looking out. He says all knowledge, everything you will ever learn or know, is already inside the human mind. He compares the mind to a piece of flint.
A piece of flint. This is a massive paradigm shift.
It is. Vivekananda argues that no knowledge actually comes from the outside world. The external world merely provides the friction. It strikes the flint to bring out the fire that is already dormant inside the stone.
He points to Sir Isaac Newton for this, right? The story we all know. Newton is sitting under a tree, an apple falls on his head, and boom, he discovers the law of gravitation.
Right, but Vivekananda asks a really profound question about that. Where was the knowledge of gravity? Was it hiding inside the apple?
Was it buried in the soil of the earth, waiting to be dug up? No.
Exactly. The falling of the apple was just a physical suggestion. It was a blow, a momentary piece of friction that struck the flint of Newton's mind. The knowledge, the capacity to understand the physical laws of the universe was already in Newton.
The event merely uncovered it. Now, I have to say, I remember reading this and having to just stop, because it sounds completely counterintuitive to how we experience life.
Oh, totally. It goes against everything we're taught.
Right. Like if I decide tomorrow to learn how to code a website or speak conversational French, is Vivekananda really saying I'm not acquiring new information, I'm just remembering it?
Well, within the broader context of Vedanta philosophy, yes. The fundamental belief there is that the human soul is infinitely knowledgeable, but that infinite knowledge is covered by dense layers of ignorance.
So the process of learning isn't taking something alien from the outside and shoving it into your brain. Learning is the process of removing the veil. It is an uncovering.
That's a great way to put it.
I was trying to map this onto how we deal with technology today, because it feels like we treat the human brain like a blank external hard drive. We think we have to plug it into the internet like school, books, experiences, and download files onto it.
But Vivekananda is saying it's not a blank hard drive at all.
Right. It's more like a massive, infinitely powerful search engine. It's looking through a database of raw understanding that we already possess, but we just haven't indexed it yet. So the outside world, the apple falling or the French textbook, is just typing a query into the search bar.
I love that. The search engine analogy captures the mechanics perfectly. The external event forces your internal system to retrieve, organize, and manifest the understanding.
Yeah, and when we place Jeff Keller's window and Vivekananda's flint next to each other, a really profound agreement emerges.
They are both telling you that external circumstances do not inject wisdom, success, or happiness into you. It is entirely dependent on the mind's reaction to the circumstance.
Exactly. Wiping the dirt off Keller's window to see the opportunity, or allowing the friction of the world to strike Vivekananda's flint. The absolute power resides solely within the mechanism of your own mind.
Which naturally forces the question, how does that mechanism actually operate? If the mind is this all-powerful tool processing reality, what are the physical or psychological gears turning inside of it?
Because we always talk about the mind as this vague cloud floating in our heads. But Vivekananda doesn't leave it vague. He provides a literal, structural breakdown of the psychology of a single thought.
He introduces a fourfold function of the mind. This is ancient Indian psychology, but the architecture of it is incredibly precise. He breaks the mind down into four specific aspects: Chitta, Manas, Buddhi, and Ahamkara.
Okay, let's pull the engine block out and look at the cylinders here. Use really simple words for this.
Let's do it. So the base layer, the foundation of it all, is Chitta. Think of Chitta as the mind stuff. It's the vast, deep lake of your memory and subconscious.
So it's the massive storehouse where every single impression you have ever experienced is filed away.
Exactly. Every conversation, every trauma, the smell of rain when you were 5 years old, the taste of a specific food, it all lives in the Chitta.
Got it. So if I'm walking down the street and I see someone I haven't spoken to in 15 years, the Chitta is the filing cabinet that suddenly throws their face and the name Sarah up into my conscious awareness. It just supplies the raw data from the archives.
Right. It presents the impression, but it doesn't make a decision about it. That is the job of the next layer, which is Manas.
Manas.
Manas is the faculty of deliberation. It is the wavering mind. It takes the data from the Chitta and starts examining the options, imagining scenarios, and conceptualizing.
Oh, so it's the part of your mind that starts debating. Like, is that Sarah from high school? Or does she just look like Sarah? Should I say hello? Will it be awkward? Maybe she doesn't remember me.
Precisely. The Manas is the anxiety engine. It's the wavering, the endless pros and cons. It hasn't chosen a path yet. It's just spinning the possibilities.
The wavering mind. That makes so much sense. So what comes next?
Well, this is why the third layer is the most critical for any form of personality development or success. This is the booty.
Booty.
Booty is your intellect, your determination, your profound decision-making faculty. It possesses the power of discrimination.
Okay, so it watches the manas wavering back and forth, weighs the reality of the situation against your ultimate goals, and steps in to make a firm judgment.
Yes. It says, yes, that is Sarah. We are going to walk over and say hello. Booty is the seat of human willpower.
Wow. And then the final piece of the engine.
Ahamkara, the ego, the I consciousness. It is the part of the mind that swoops in and appropriates the decision to yourself. It identifies with the physical body and the action. It says, I recognize Sarah. I am making the choice to walk over. I am doing this.
So we have the storehouse, which is chitta, the deliberator, which is manas, the decision maker, which is buddhi, and the ego claiming the action, ahamkara. It's fascinating, but, it can feel a little abstract.
It can, definitely. But to make this intensely practical, Vivekananda relies on one of the most famous allegories in ancient literature, the chariot allegory from the Katha Upanishad.
Oh, this is such a good visual. It takes this fourfold function and turns it into something almost cinematic.
Right. Imagine a chariot racing down a dusty road. The physical body you occupy is the chariot itself.
Okay.
The horses violently pulling this chariot forward are your sense organs, your eyes, your ears, your sense of smell, taste, and touch. The road they are running on represents the objects of the physical world.
And the horses don't have a grand plan, right? They just want to run toward whatever looks good, whatever smells good, whatever provides immediate gratification.
Exactly. Now, the reins connected to the bits in the horses' mouths represent the manas, the wavering, deliberating mind.
Okay, the reins are the manas.
Yes. And the driver standing in the chariot, the charioteer gripping those reins, is the buddhi, the intellect and willpower. And finally, sitting quietly in the back of the chariot, experiencing the journey, is the master of the chariot, the true soul or the true I.
Let's run a highly mundane, everyday scenario through this ancient chariot, because honestly, it explains so much of human failure.
Let's hear it.
Okay, you walk into your kitchen late at night. The house is completely dark, but the refrigerator light is on. Inside, sitting on a plate, is a massive leftover piece of chocolate cake.
Oh, boy.
And you were supposed to be on a diet. You committed to losing 10 pounds.
The quintessential modern dilemma right there.
It really is. So your eyes, the wild horses of the senses, lock onto the cake. The raw data floods in. Instantly, your chitta, the storehouse, throws up the memory file. Chocolate cake, sugar, we've eaten this before. It delivers an immediate, incredible dopamine hit.
And the horses start pulling violently toward the fridge. The data is live. Now the reins, the manas, start vibrating with deliberation.
And Manasi kicks in.
Should we eat it? It looks amazing. But the diet, I'll feel terrible tomorrow. But, I had a really stressful day at work. I deserve a reward. Just one piece. I'll run an extra mile tomorrow.
The manas is wavering endlessly.
The reins are slack, and the horses are stepping closer and closer to the cake.
This is the critical juncture. This is where the buddhi, the charioteer, must assert dominance. The intellect has to look past the immediate gratification, remember the long-term goal of health, tighten its grip on the reins, and pull back hard.
The buddhi has to make the definitive command. No, we made a commitment. Close the door.
What I love about this mechanical breakdown is that it completely demystifies why we self-sabotage. I mean, if your charioteer, your buddhi, is exhausted or weak or just asleep at the wheel, what happened?
The wavering manas simply drops the reins.
The senses run wild. They drag the chariot straight to the cake. You eat the entire thing, and the chariot crashes into guilt and physical lethargy. It's not that you are a fundamentally broken person. It's that your specific faculty of willpower wasn't strong enough to hold the horses.
It shifts the framework from moral failure to mechanical failure, and it immediately begs the question, how do we strengthen the charioteer? How do we build the muscle of the buddhi so it doesn't drop the reins when the horses panic?
Well, Jeff Keller and Swami Vivekananda point to the exact same training regimen. The words we speak and the habits we endlessly repeat.
Let's look at Keller first. His entire thesis and attitude is everything boils down to 6 words. You become what you think about.
You become what you think about.
He argues that the words you use internally and externally are the literal programming language of your mind. You are typing code into your own subconscious.
He points out how casually we destroy our own charioteer, too. We say things like, oh, I'm just not a numbers guy, or I could never start my own business, or I always freeze up in public speaking. We think we're just making harmless observations about our current reality.
But the subconscious mind doesn't understand context. It doesn't process self-deprecation, sarcasm, or modesty.
Yeah.
It takes your words as literal commands.
Oh.
If you feed the subconscious a steady daily diet of negative assertions, you are systematically programming your booty to accept failure as the baseline reality. You are loosening the charioteer's grip on the reins.
So Keller challenges his readers with a seemingly ridiculous experiment to fix this. He zeroes in on how we answer the most common question in the English language, which is, how are you?
Right.
Someone asks you in the hallway at work, hey, how you doing today? The vast majority of us reply with neutral, low-energy filler, I'm surviving, hanging in there. Not too bad. Is it Friday yet?
We hear it 100 times a day.
We really do. But Keller argues that by consistently using these deflated words, we are programming ourselves for a deflated, not too bad existence. His challenge is that for an entire month, no matter how you actually feel, when someone asks how you are, you must respond with aggressive positivity. You say, terrific, or excellent.
And the natural resistance to this is immense. People say, I'm not going to lie, if I'm having a miserable Tuesday, I'm not going to grin and tell my coworker I'm terrific. It's inauthentic.
Right, people hate feeling fake.
Exactly. But Keller's focus isn't on absolute emotional transparency with your coworkers. His focus is on your own physiology and internal expectation.
I thought about this deeply. Imagine forcing yourself to say terrific when you were just exhausted. You can't mumble it while slouching.
No, the word itself demands a physiological shift.
It does. You have to stand up slightly straighter. You have to take a slightly deeper breath. You have to force a micro expression of energy onto your face.
You are artificially generating a state change. And when you change your physical state and project that vitality outward, the environment reacts to you differently.
People are drawn to energy.
They are. You begin to attract better interactions, which in turn actually makes you feel better. You are hacking the feedback loop.
It is the ultimate practical application of fake it till you make it, applied directly to your internal vocabulary. But Keller is just giving us the practical trick. When we filter this exact same concept through Swami Vivekananda, we get the deep, underlying spiritual physics of why saying terrific actually rewires the brain.
Right. Vivekananda talks about the formation of character as the accumulation of what he calls samskaras.
Samskaras, what are those exactly?
Samskaras are the deep impressions or grooves left in the mind stuff. Vivekananda explains that every single action you take and every single thought that passes through your head leaves a literal mark on the chitta.
Like a stylus scratching a record.
Exactly like that. Even when that thought drops below your conscious awareness, the impression remains. It sinks into the subconscious and continues to hum beneath the surface. When you accumulate a large number of similar impressions, say thousands of tiny thoughts of self-doubt, they merge together to form a powerful tendency, a deep groove. That groove is your character.
Think about water flowing down a mountain. The first few times it rains, the water just finds random paths.
Yeah.
But over years, the water carves a deep riverbed into the stone.
Yeah.
Once that riverbed is carved, the next time it rains, the water doesn't have a choice.
Yeah.
It violently rushes down that exact specific groove. If a person spends 10 years complaining, constantly thinking negative thoughts, using words like, I can't, they have carved a massive canyon of negative samskaras.
The groove is so deep that the moment they encounter a challenge, their mind automatically flows into the canyon of defeat. They act cowardly or weak, almost like an automaton. They don't even have to deliberate. The tendency forces the action.
But the terrifying part is also the liberating part, right? Because if you carve the canyon, you can carve a new one.
Absolutely. Vivekananda states that you cannot fight a deeply ingrained bad habit with empty willpower alone. You can't just stand in front of the river and tell it to stop flowing.
Right.
You have to carve a counter habit. You have to meticulously, daily, continuously think wholly positive, empowering thoughts to carve a new groove that eventually reroutes the water.
So Keller tells you to say, I am terrific, to fix your stalled career. Vivekananda tells you that by saying, I am terrific, you are chiseling a brand new samskara into the bedrock of your soul, slowly burying the old impressions of weakness.
The businessman gives you the medicine. The monk explains the molecular biology of why the medicine cures the disease.
That is such a good way to look at it. And Vivekananda pushes this even further into a realm that sounds almost like science fiction. He proposes that human thought is not just an isolated internal event. It is a literal, physical vibration.
He uses the metaphor of throwing a heavy stone into a completely still lake. The stone hits, and ripples travel outward in concentric circles until they hit the shore. He argues that when you generate a thought, your mind enters a specific state of vibration, and those thought waves travel out into the
He
universe.
draws a parallel to tuning forks.
Yeah?
Or musical instruments.
Yes. If you have a room full of instruments tuned to the exact same pitch, and you strike one, the others will begin to vibrate sympathetically. Vivekananda suggests that your thought vibrations travel outward and interact with other minds that are strung to the same emotional or spiritual tension.
Let's play with this because the implications are staggering. If you wake up, read the news, get furious, and dwell on anger and resentment, your mind is vibrating at a very specific jagged frequency.
Right.
Vivekananda implies that by holding that frequency, your mind acts as a receiver, catching all the other angry, miserable vibrations floating in the ether from other people. You become a literal magnet for misery. But if you hold a vibration of peace or strength, it acts as a shield, tuning out the negativity and catching the positive waves.
It creates an inescapable feedback loop. You attract the reality that matches your internal frequency.
When I was reading this, it suddenly clicked. The best modern metaphor for Vivekananda's 19th century thought vibration theory is the algorithm on social media, like TikTok or Instagram.
Oh, that's interesting.
Think about it. If you open a social media app and you stop scrolling to watch 3 videos in a row of people arguing in traffic or political outrage, what happens? The algorithm doesn't judge you. It just registers the engagement. It says, this user wants outrage.
And suddenly, your entire feed is an endless stream of anger.
For days, your reality inside that app is completely warped by your attention.
That is an astonishingly precise translation of the concept. Your attention trains the algorithm of your own mind. If you continuously click on the negative thoughts in your head, the subconscious algorithm assumes that is the reality you desire, and it begins to feed you a continuous stream of negative perceptions. The world outside hasn't changed, but your feed is a nightmare.
And to tie this back to Jeff Keller's practicality, he is hyper-aware that changing this internal algorithm is brutal work. He warns his readers that positive thinking is not fairy dust.
No, definitely not.
You don't just say, I am terrific on a Tuesday and wake up on Wednesday morning with $1 million into your mattress and all your trauma healed.
He's very clear. Not by long shot. The old grooves, the old samskaras took decades to carve. A few days of positive thinking won't reroute the river. It requires intense, relentless daily repetition. You have to keep feeding the positive algorithm consistently over months and years to actually shift the baseline frequency of your mind.
Right. Building these new habits, carving these new grooves, holding onto the reins of the chariot. All of this sounds beautifully logical when you are sitting in a comfortable chair, sipping coffee, reading a self-help book.
Sure, it makes perfect sense in a vacuum.
But life is not a vacuum. The chariot hits massive, axle-breaking potholes. How do these philosophies hold up when you face crushing failure, rejection, bankruptcy, grief?
This is where the comparative study reveals a fascinating friction between the two. Let's start with Keller's approach to adversity. His fundamental, unbreakable rule is that attitude precedes action.
Attitude precedes action.
We constantly tell ourselves, well, when the economy improves, I'll start my business. When I lose weight, I'll be more confident. When my boss treats me better, I'll work harder. Keller says this is completely backwards. You cannot wait for the external circumstances to improve before you change your attitude. The attitude must be forced into positivity first, often in the pitch dark.
He shares a very vulnerable story about his own life regarding this. In the late 70s and early 80s, Keller lived in New York, and he watched people around him making absolute fortunes, buying and renting out investment properties. He wanted in.
So he read the books, he studied the market.
He knew the exact mechanical actions required: review the newspaper listings, contact realtors, visit the duplexes, sign the papers. The physical steps were clear. But he had a terrible attitude. He was consumed by the fear of failure. He obsessed over the potential headaches. What if the boiler breaks? What if the tenants destroy the drywall? What if the market crashes?
Because his mental window was smeared with fear, the action was literally impossible. For years, he sat on the sidelines and did absolutely nothing.
Yeah.
He possessed the knowledge, but without the attitude, the chariot couldn't move.
Right.
It wasn't until he consciously forced himself to wash the window, to shift his dominant thoughts away from the disaster scenarios and toward the potential upside, that the paralysis broke. The moment the attitude shifted, the action naturally and effortlessly followed. He bought the properties and succeeded.
And Keller takes this principle to the absolute extreme by bringing up Viktor Frankl, the psychiatrist who survived the horrors of the Nazi concentration camps. It is the ultimate test case for this philosophy.
Because in a death camp, every single physical freedom is violently stripped away. You don't control your food, your movements, your clothing, or your survival. The circumstances are unspeakably horrific.
Yet Frankl observed that even in that abyss, the final, irreducible human freedom remained. The power to choose one's own attitude in any given set of circumstances. If Frankl could maintain a sliver of inner freedom and define his own mental state while surrounded by barbed wire, Keller forcefully argues that we have zero excuse to let a bad quarterly review or a traffic jam dictate our attitude.
Keller also zeroes in on the sheer endurance required to survive failure, the necessity of maintaining the positive expectation when the world keeps telling you no. He talks about Jack Canfield and Mark Victor Hansen, the creators of the Chicken Soup for the Soul series.
Right. They compiled this manuscript, they believed in it, and they took it to publishers.
And they were rejected. Not once or twice. They were rejected by 33 different publishers.
Let's just stop to feel the weight of that. You get rejected 5 times, you question your talent. You get rejected 15 times, your family tells you to get a real job. By rejection number 30, most human beings would let their attitude shatter into a million pieces.
Yeah, the groove of failure would be so deep they'd never write again.
But they kept the attitude intact in spite of the reality. The 34th publisher said yes, and they sold hundreds of millions of copies. Keller also points to Rush Limbaugh, who spent 12 years floundering in low-paying, obscure radio jobs, getting fired, facing ridicule, before he finally broke through. The persistence survived only because the attitude was walled off from the external failure.
So Keller's framework is essentially one of endurance. Maintain your positive attitude in spite of the misery, use it as a shield, and push through until you achieve your worldly goals. But when we turn the page to Swami Vivekananda, the philosophy takes a massive, radical step further.
He doesn't just tell you to endure it.
No. Vivekananda doesn't tell you to just endure the misery or shield yourself from it. He essentially demands that you welcome it. Because misery, according to Vivekananda, is the greatest teacher the human soul will ever encounter.
This is a profoundly countercultural idea. Vivekananda roots this in the true definition of karma. In the West, we've bastardized the word karma. We use it like a cosmic scoreboard. If I hold the door for someone, karma will find me a good parking spot. If I steal, karma will give me a flat tire. It's a reward and punishment system.
But in Sanskrit, the word karma simply translates to action or work. It is the law of cause and effect applied to the soul. Every physical action you take and every single thought you generate is a blow struck upon the mind.
It is the hammer striking the flint.
Exactly. And Vivekananda argues that if you study the grand sweep of human history and you look at the towering figures, the greatest minds, the most unshakable characters, you find a startling pattern. It was rarely wealth, comfort, or relentless praise that forged their greatness. In almost every single instance, it was poverty, betrayal, suffering, and profound misery that brought out their inner fire.
I really struggled with this concept initially because our entire modern existence is engineered to avoid friction. We buy ergonomic chairs, we medicate every ache, we distract ourselves with screens the second we feel bored or sad. We spend all our energy running away from pain.
We really do. But Vivekananda is suggesting that comfort puts the charioteer to sleep. When everything is fine, the booty gets lazy.
What if that terrible failure, that agonizing rejection, that moment you were fired, what if that was the exact necessary friction your flint needed to spark?
It completely reframes adversity. If pleasure is your only goal in life, then pain is an unfair punishment. But Vivekananda states that pleasure is not the goal of human existence. Knowledge is the goal. The realization of your own internal power is the goal. And from that perspective, pain is a far more efficient instructor than happiness.
If we synthesize Keller and Vivekananda here, it creates an unstoppable mindset for action. You can't sit around waiting for the circumstances to be perfectly aligned and painless before you make a move.
Right. As Keller learned with his real estate, the attitude has to shift first.
And as Vivekananda teaches, the resistance isn't in the way of the path. The resistance is the path. Once you stop viewing adversity as a tragedy and start viewing it as the necessary friction for your own expansion, the hesitation vanishes. Action becomes inevitable.
Which brings us to the heaviest, most unforgiving, and yet ultimately the most empowering section of this entire comparative study. If our thoughts are the algorithm determining our reality, and if adversity is just a mechanism for growth, then who do we blame when our lives are in absolute shambles?
Both Jeff Keller and Swami Vivekananda arrive at a terrifying conclusion. Absolute 100% self-reliance, no more excuses.
They demand total accountability, and they leave no room for the ego to hide. Keller is incredibly blunt. He says, look, it is your job to keep your window clean, period.
You can buy my book, you can listen to deep dives, you can have supportive friends, but at the end of the day, nobody else has the squeegee. Nobody else can watch the glass inside your head. You alone control the attitude.
Keller observes how deeply ingrained the instinct to blame is in human nature. He notes that when a business fails or a family fractures, the immediate instinct of the leader is to look outward. It was the macroeconomic environment. Interest rates were too high. My employees were unmotivated. I had a difficult childhood. It was just spectacularly bad luck.
We construct elaborate, bulletproof narratives to explain why we are faultless victims of circumstance.
Because being a victim feels safe. It absolves us of the responsibility to fix it.
But Vivekananda completely obliterates this comfort. He says, man is the maker of his own destiny. He writes fiercely against the conditioning of weakness. He argues that the world is being systematically degraded by teachings that tell people they are helpless sinners, cogs in a machine, or permanent victims of their environment.
His mandate is very clear. Strength is life, weakness is death. He insists we must teach people that they are inherently divine and capable of infinite power. But the terrifying trade-off for infinite power is infinite responsibility. You cannot claim the power to build your life without simultaneously accepting the blame for breaking it.
Vivekananda uses a thought experiment to illustrate how responsibility actively transforms character. He says, imagine a hardened criminal, a man who has spent his life being selfish, violent, looking out only for his own survival. Now imagine you take a fragile, helpless little baby and you place that baby directly into the arms of this criminal. What happens in that exact moment?
The transformation is instantaneous. The criminal doesn't hurt the child. For that specific moment, his entire character shifts. He becomes gentle, hyper-aware, fiercely protective, and completely unselfish.
Why?
Because the absolute, undeniable responsibility for that fragile life has been thrown squarely onto his shoulders. The sudden weight of total responsibility forces his highest character to manifest.
Vivekananda's challenge to us is that we must place that exact same terrifying, absolute responsibility onto our own shoulders for our own destiny. No more complaining. No more blaming the alignment of the stars, the government, your parents, or the economy. If you are a failure, you must stand up and say, I am the architect of this failure.
While that sounds like a crushing burden to carry, it is, paradoxically, the source of ultimate liberation. Think about the logic of blame. If someone else is truly to blame for your misery, if society or your ex or your boss is at fault, then you are a helpless passenger. You have to wait for them to change before you can be happy. You have surrendered your power.
Right. But if you are to blame for your awful circumstances, it means you are holding the reins. It means you possess the exact same mechanical power to create magnificent circumstances as you did to create the disaster. Taking the blame is taking the power back.
It is the ultimate freedom. You are the driver. And this ties into another concept from Vivekananda that completely flips how we view self-control in the modern world.
Oh, this is fascinating.
We spend massive amounts of energy and money trying to learn how to focus. We take supplements, we drink caffeine, we use apps to block websites so we can concentrate. We think power is the ability to attach the mind to a subject. But Vivekananda says that true power, true mastery of the mind, isn't just concentration, it is the power of detachment.
The capacity to instantly and completely sever the mind's connection to an object or a thought.
Yes, he writes about how people will say, I would give half my life to take my mind off that object, but I cannot.
How unbelievably true is that? You receive a passive-aggressive email from a coworker at 4:00 p.m. on a Friday. You go home, and you ruin your entire weekend obsessing over those 3 sentences. You replay it in the shower, you think of clever comebacks while you're trying to sleep.
You are a prisoner. The horses have the bit in their teeth, and they are dragging you through the mud.
Absolute self-reliance means developing the buddhi to the point where you can look at that thought and say, this is damaging my machinery. I am detaching my mind from this right now, and the thought instantly drops.
That is the ultimate test of the charioteer. It's not just driving the chariot. It's the ability to drop the reins and stick away when the road leads off a cliff. It is the ability to unsmudge the window on command, refusing to look through the dirt of resentment.
So let's bring all of this together. Let's say a listener takes everything we've discussed and rigorously applies it. They wake up tomorrow and start actively washing their mental window. They recognize the wavering of the manas, and they force the buddhi to grip the reins.
They change their internal vocabulary, banishing I can't and aggressively stating terrific to change their posture.
They accept the painful friction of life as a necessary teacher, and they take 100% total terrifying responsibility for every aspect of their existence.
Hmm.
Where does this actually lead? What is the ultimate goal we are driving toward?
This is where we see a beautiful divergence in the ultimate aims of our two sources, even though the mechanical steps to get there are identical. Let's look at Jeff Keller first.
Okay.
For Keller, the ultimate goal of cleaning the window and mastering your attitude is to unlock your worldly potential. It is about achieving extraordinary, tangible results in the physical world. It's about becoming an unstoppable force in your career, building generational wealth, cultivating fantastic relationships, and, as he phrases it, creating miracles in your own life.
It's the peak actualization of the American dream, becoming the absolute most effective, successful version of yourself in society.
Precisely. Now, Swami Vivekananda's goal points in a distinctly different direction, though it requires the exact same foundational strength. For Vivekananda, the ultimate objective is not material wealth, social status, or worldly success. The goal of all karma, of all this internal friction and discipline, is to manifest the inherent, infinite divinity that is already inside you.
He states that a truly great human being is harmoniously developed in three areas: head, heart, and hand.
Right, head, heart, and hand. The intellect to understand reality, the emotion to feel deep compassion, and the physical action to execute the will.
And when a person achieves this level of profound personality development, when their chitta is calm, their sanskars are pure, and their buddhi is in absolute control of the chariot, they transform into a human dynamo. They literally throw a halo of influence around themselves.
Their very presence alters the environment. They don't even need to write books or give speeches. Their sheer character brings others into their state of powerful, positive vibration.
If we translate these ultimate goals into simple terms, Keller's success and Vivekananda's divinity are really just two vocabularies describing the exact same state of human evolution. They're both describing a person operating at their absolute highest capacity, a person who is completely unbroken by the tragedies of the world, a person who no longer reacts to stimuli like a predictable machine, but who deliberately creates their own reality from the inside out.
And that is the perfect summation of this comparative study. Whether your ultimate ambition is to amass a fortune in commercial real estate like Jeff Keller, or your goal is to sit in silence and achieve total spiritual liberation like a Vedanta monk, the psychological and physical laws of the universe do not change.
The greatest power in the world does not reside in your bank account, your physical muscles, or your external circumstances.
No, the true absolute power is lodged entirely in the fine, invisible, microscopic movements of your own thoughts.
That is the invisible machinery under the hood.
Yeah.
So as you go through your week, remember the absolute basics from these two mentors. Number one, wash your window. Catch yourself when you start projecting your own pessimism onto the world.
Number two, grab the reins. When the horses of your senses try to drag you toward the chocolate cake or toward anger, wake up the charioteer.
Number three, change your algorithm. Force yourself to say, I can, or I am terrific, even if it feels ridiculous, just to see how your physiology reacts. And finally, take total responsibility for the blows of life. Stop running from the friction and let us spark the flint.
The mechanics are surprisingly straightforward. The work of applying them is the task of a lifetime.
I want to leave you with one final, deeply provocative thought to turn over in your mind today, inspired by Vivekananda's theory of thought vibrations. We are completely conditioned to believe that our minds are isolated, private islands. We think, well, as long as I keep my mouth shut, as long as I don't type it out loud, my bad mood or my toxic thoughts aren't hurting anyone but me.
We view our internal monologue as a victimless crime.
But if Vivekananda's mechanics are correct, if thoughts are literal, physical forces that travel outward, like light waves across millions of years, vibrating and violently affecting other human minds that are strung to the same tension, then your private thoughts are never actually private.
It shatters the illusion of isolation.
Think about the weight of that. If you sit alone in a dark room, dwelling in intense self-pity, resentment, and weakness, are you actually polluting the invisible mental atmosphere of the world? Are your negative vibrations making it microscopically harder for someone else on the other side of the city to hold their own reins?
And conversely, if you were just sitting in terrible traffic, not saying a word, but silently, fiercely cultivating strength, peace, and positive expectation, are you secretly healing people you will never even meet?
The invisible machinery isn't just driving your life, it might be driving ours.
The engine is running.
Be very careful with your reins today. Thanks for taking this deep dive with us.